Welcome to OKState Daily. Casey Porter here. So glad that you decided to tune in. Fans, there is a whole bunch to talk about. We have a new defensive coordinator. Last week is finally over. That's the best thing you can say about all of the happenings of last week. And one of the greatest things is now we have Robbie Rainwater, Coach Robbie Rainwater, in joining the show. Coach, make it rain.
Yeah, like I said, a lot transpired over last week. And, here on this podcast, for the last several weeks, we've talked about, making changes or becoming the change yourself. And I think we saw a little bit of that last week. And I think just kind of the things that we talked about all season long came to fruition. And part of, when you're sitting here talking and having these thoughts, one of the things that I'm very careful of is trying to not use speculation or, I think we saw what happened last week when people want to jump to conclusions and want to be the first to report something. Yeah. And that's the kind of conjecture you want to stay away from when you're trying to, people can't take you serious if you're accurate 1% of the time, you know what I mean? Or a low percent of the time. And so, I know you have that same sentiment of wanting to stick to facts and, obviously give an opinion, but that opinion being the opinion of a broader base as opposed to just ourselves, and right, so, sure. And kind of being a voice for Oklahoma State fans or the feelings that other fans have that are, our friends that we've talked to and what they're hearing, what they say or what they're feeling and, that sort of thing. So, going back to one of the first podcasts I was on talking about, changes need to be made. And if you're not willing to make those changes, then you're going to have to be the change. And I think we saw that, and I think we saw that from top down, whether people agree with how it was handled or not, or who was hired in replacement of the people that were let go, whether people are in agreement with that or not. The situation is kind of goes back to the old adage of don't start none, there won't be none, right? Don't put yourself in a position for somebody to insert their authority over you, right? Don't put yourself in a position where you're not willing to make changes to the point where somebody has to come in and make the change for you. And so whether people like how it was handled or not or whatever, it had to happen. And I think no matter how it was handled or who was hired, there's going to be, opinions on both sides of the coin from it. And, but what we got is exactly what we asked for. And that is something's got to change, and we'll see how good a change it was.
Yeah. So no real autonomy no real limitations on the hirings in terms of offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. So Mike Gundy again has complete autonomy over that. We've already seen Todd Grantham hired. Mm-hmm. So talk about the hiring process for him and how you see that going.
To me, honestly, what I would like to see in the hiring process is not what scheme they're going to run, right? Not how loyal they're going to be to OSU. I don't care about any of that, right? What I care about is who are we going to bring in that's going to be a draw to the athletes, right? Who are we going to bring in that's going to be somebody that kids want to come play for, right? And if that was the case with Todd Grantham, because he's got names like Florida and Alabama and NFL behind his name, then so be it. Let's ride with it and see how it works, right? But I'm not stuck to a certain scheme. I'm not stuck to a certain way or philosophy. What I'm stuck to is how are we going to get kids here that are going to be competitive to make OSU an entertaining brand of football again? That's what, and that will remain to be seen. And people can speculate on that regardless of who the hire is and what their ability is going to be. I think one thing that that people are going to start realizing is, your coordinators don't have to be the guys that are going into living rooms and convincing moms anymore. Right. That's going to be few and far between. What you're having to hire now, what coaches are having to hire now are people that can go out and get 20, 21-year-old men to come to your program, not 17 or 18-year-old boys.
Exactly. Good point.
And
it's like you're recruiting a free agent.
Yeah, that's exactly right. right? Somebody that was on a rookie contract for 2 or 3 years and now is a redshirt sophomore or junior, and that's 20, 21, 22 years old, that you're going in and trying to convince him that you can get him to the next level, and that's a great point. That's what it is. It's not a personality relationship where you go in, into a living room somewhere and try and convince mom that this is the best place for their 17-year-old or 18-year-old son. This is talking to grown men and talking about what you're going to do for them in a short amount of time and how you're going to get them to the next level. So
it's transactional.
It's transactional. And I think that's what you potentially, obviously we weren't behind the curtain in all the conversations, but I think potentially that's why you're going to see people like Todd Grantham and more of that style being hired because of the resume and the places they've been and the people they've coached and the teams that they've coached on and the different levels that they've been at. And so, and that's very convincing. We've moved, college football has moved from, 8, 10, 12 years ago, which is crazy to think that was 2012, 2014. Yeah, but we have moved from the era of kids were committing to schools. As funny as it sounds, kids were committing to schools because of the uniform combinations.
Yeah, right.
Right? You think about all the different uniform combinations that have existed over the last 15, 20 years in college football, looking at Oregon with Nike and even OSU and the blue and teams were having to do that to compete to get some kids because that was the era of football, right, of uniform combinations. That wasn't all of it, but that was part of it. Now you're moving into the era of football of being a transfer all replace and who is going to be there and what's the name behind the coordinators and the place they've been and the guys that they're attached to and the relationships those guys have, not just with the current football players, but maybe guys that are in the NFL. And so I think that's potentially what you saw with the hire of Todd Grantham. And like I said a while ago, the loyalty deal has never been, I've always understood loyal and true was about the fan base being loyal to the university, not some coordinator that has no attachment to OSU whatsoever and expecting them to be here for 8 or 10 years.
Right.
I couldn't care less. I couldn't care less if those coordinators have a loyalty to OSU. But are you going to bring in a brand of football that's going to make us competitive year in and year out in the Big 12? That's what I care about. And so if Todd Grantham's a guy for that, so be it. And that will remain to be seen. People are going to, talk for the next 8 or 9 months about whether that's going to be the case or not. But the proof's in the pudding, and we'll see what result comes of it, what products put on the field.
You've been on every side of this. You've been on the coaching side, the playing side. You've been on the administrative side where you've had to make changes and hire new coaches. Yeah. And then you've also been on the even higher administrative side where you've had to administrate coaches themselves, right, and personnel in these situations. So you would have a great perspective on this. So seeing how this season played out with the tenure that Mike Gundy's had here, how much confidence have you lost in him versus how much confidence do you have left in all of his abilities to turn this thing around?
I think the majority of the confidence is still there. I think it was more of a disappointment on my part it was more of a dragging of feet feeling, that I think everybody in the organization knew a change had to be made. But where I think the disappointment came that eventually turned people to lose confidence, like you're saying, in Coach Gundy, is how long it took for a change to be made, right? Mm-hmm. There's no way in the world, and I said this on the last podcast, there's no way in the world that Coach Gundy, as a football mind that he is, and as long as he's been around the game, there's no way that he didn't recognize the same deficiencies that everybody else did. But where the disappointment or the lack of confidence or the confidence started lacking from the fan base is, then why aren't you doing anything about it, right? And I think Coach Gundy was so stuck in a process of not making a change mid-season or in the first third of the season or even in the last third of the season that he was so stuck in his process that the results of that decision forced everybody else to be involved, right? Yeah, right. If you don't like the way Chad Weiberg got involved or Dr. Strum or the Board of Regents, then don't give them a reason to get involved, right? Yeah. In that there's no way that you couldn't recognize the deficiencies that were there. And I even went as far last podcast as saying that I think he knew the deficiencies were there before the season ever started, right? It's not like this was something new, right? And so I think where the confidence in the fan base in Coach Gundy, and even then furthermore to the Board of Regents losing some confidence in Coach Gundy, is his unwillingness to make a change inside of his own process based on the results. And that was a statement made by him, right? And I think probably this was the first year that Coach Gundy said enough things that eventually hurt him in press conferences. When you say things like, I'm focused on the process, not the results. Well, wait a minute. Okay. Every form of life has an accountability measure.
Sure.
Right. And the accountability measure for a process is the results that it's producing. Yes. Right. So how are you ever going to do self-reflection? How are you?
That may be just getting better. It doesn't have to necessarily always be wins, but if we could at least win, like the BYU game, hey, we're getting better. Okay. Well, that's a good result. Right.
And so how are you ever going to do true reflection on your process and see what you need to tweak from here to here? Because it all goes back to complacency, right? It actually, that's the reason why it's the worst word in the English language, is because complacency actually doesn't exist. You're either getting better or you're getting worse. So you constantly have to be monitoring your process based on the results it's producing. So when you say things like, I'm not focused on the results, I'm only focused on the process, you're opening an avenue for people in positions of authority to start getting involved in. Right. So if you're not focused on the results that your process is producing, then what you're saying is your way of doing things and the process that you have is more important than the wins and losses. Right.
Well, it has no grading system.
There's 55,000 people in the stands that don't believe that. Right. Because there's 55,000. There's only a couple hundred people that are involved in the process. There are hundreds of thousands of a fan base that are involved in the results.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's all they care about.
That's all they care about. Right. They don't care what the process is. And it's kind of like I tell my staff, as long as it's legal and ethical, I don't care. Get the results. Right. Yeah. But when you start teetering on either side of that in the process, whether you're doing things illegal, then you can't do it. Or if it's not producing the results that's needed, then you got to change.
Yeah.
Right. And where the lack of confidence or the disappointment, in my opinion, came in was, do you recognize there's a deficiency? Okay. And if you don't, then that's a complete competence issue, and we got a bigger issue on our hand. But in my opinion, you do recognize that there's a deficiency, but you're unwilling to change for the betterment of the program. Yeah. Right. And that he put individuals ahead of the program. And what is the statement that is always made? There's not one person that's more important than the program. Right. So why did we defend and not change deficiencies while the program was suffering?
Yeah. And so he did exactly what you said you don't ever do. You don't put like an individual, a coordinator's allegiance to Oklahoma State. You could give a rat's ass because all you care about is OSU. So you're saying he did the exact opposite. He put the individuals in front of the school.
That's the perception, right? Correct. That's the perception, because there was no change made, right? Yeah, right. The in-game adjustments, the game planning, personnel, whatever the case is, okay, there was never any forced change on that. You don't have to fire somebody mid-season in order to put somebody else in charge of calling plays, right? Casey Dunn could have kept his job for the remainder of the season, but mid-season go in and say, somebody else can call plays because this ain't working. Right. Yeah. And it really looks like the perception, right? Which perception is reality. Whether it's right or wrong doesn't matter. The way people perceive you is the way they're going to treat you. If they perceive you to be smart and intelligent and a good person, they're going to treat you like a smart, intelligent, good person. If they perceive you to be a bum, they're going to treat you like a bum. If they perceive you to be a jerk, they're going to treat you like a jerk. Right. Absolutely. And so when people have a perception that the only reason why he's not making a change is because either he doesn't realize there's a deficiency or he's putting the individual ahead of the program. Either one isn't any good.
Yeah. No,
right. And there was nothing done. There was no pun intended. There was nothing done to change. That was bad. Yeah. There was nothing done to change the perception. Mm-hmm. Right.
Great point.
And when there's nothing done to change the perception, then people start well, he's arrogant, he's egotistical, he's narcissistic, whatever people want to throw, start pointing at. And that all goes back to the things that we've talked about, in that you're either coaching it or allowing it to happen. So if you don't want people to speculate that you're coaching it, stop allowing it to happen.
Yep,
right.
Absolutely.
And regardless of the instances that took place, right? Regardless if it was massive deficiencies in weeks there wasn't a bye week, or it was we did really good after a bye week, then completely abandoning those game plans and those schemes and the creativity and the innovation with the offense after the bye week was over. Whether it was we scored a total of 10 points in the third quarter all season long and there was nothing ever done to force more halftime adjustments, right? Whatever it is that people want to point at as their justification for being upset with this coaching staff, it all goes back to make a change and a noticeable change, or you be the change. And if you don't want people to speculate that you're coaching it, then stop allowing it to happen. And those are things that we've talked about on this podcast for months. Right?
Absolutely.
And because you didn't, right? Because you didn't change that perception, because you weren't willing to make the change, because you were more focused on the process that was obviously terrible, right? Instead of the results, which was, then you forced the hand of people in positions of authority to get involved, right? And it doesn't matter if it's college football, it doesn't matter if it's public education, it doesn't matter if it's something in the private sector. If you don't want people in positions of authority to get involved and micromanage you, then don't give them a reason to get involved and micromanage you. Take care of your business, produce the results, make sure that the program or the institution or the company is taken care of, and you'll be rewarded for it. And if you don't, okay, then you're forcing people to get involved that you don't want to be involved, and you're going to lose some of your autonomy, right? But as long as the results are there, people are going to leave you alone. And this season, what you saw is you went from being Big 12 Coach of the Year to 1 year later having a 5 p.m. deadline. Right? That's how bad it got.
Right?
No doubt. And that's how noticeable it was to everybody. That's how and I think, so a short way to answer your question, I still have confidence that Mike Gundy can do it. I'm just disappointed that it got to this point to force the hand, right? Because there's no way, in my mind, I don't believe for 1 second that Mike Gundy didn't think that there was a deficiency there. I fully believe he knew there was a deficiency there. The disappointment that I have is he knew it, and he was more engaged and more dedicated to the process as opposed to protection of the program and the institution.
So you're more on the page of, hey, last week is what it is. He forced the hand of people to have to fix something, and so whatever comes out of it, you've made that bed, so now you get to lay in it. So I say that to say, for fans that are still just kind of reeling from maybe some of the comments, the losing season. We're not used to losing around here. If you're teeter-tottering on renewing season tickets or continuing to be a rabid fan like you always have been, I mean, you and I are going to continue to be, because it's not a choice for us. It just happens. But there's also other people out there that aren't quite, they didn't grow up in Stillwater or grow up diehards or whatever. So for those people that might be teetering, what's your message to them?
Well, first I would say don't renew tickets, because I'm looking. I got seats picked out that I want.
You want their seats?
So there was part of me that was hoping that this would be completely high. I was hoping that they wouldn't fire anybody. That way I could get the seats that I wanted, right?
For cheap.
Well, that'd probably be the same price, but at least I'd get to pick the seats I wanted, because people wouldn't renew. I'm half joking there,
of
right?
Course.
But no, that's all summed up and answered by me by saying what I said earlier, that loyal and true is the fan base and former alumni being loyal and true to the university. Has nothing to do with current players being loyal to OSU. Has nothing to do with new coaches coming in that are loyal to OSU. Todd Grantham was not loyal to OSU 3 hours before he was hired. What makes you think he's going to be loyal to OSU 3 hours after he's hired? Right?
Or 3, yeah.
Couldn't care less. Couldn't care less if Todd Grantham is loyal to OSU. What I care about is
loyal to the job.
That he's competitive enough, right, to want to produce a quality product and reverse this thing as easily as it can be reversed, or as quick, not easy. I keep using the word easily. It's not as quickly as it can be reversed, just like Arizona State, and put us right back on track of where we were this time last year, right? That's all I care about. Right. And I want him to do it legally. I want him to do it ethically. I want it to fit within the environment of OSU football and what we stand for and who we are. right? And I want him to be highly motivated and attached to OSU while his time is here. But I have no expectation whatsoever that Todd Grantham is going to be any more loyal to OSU this time next year than he was 1 month ago.
Yeah, right.
That has nothing to do with it. And I think that's one of the things that drive me the most nuts about OSU fans. Well, we got to find some. I'm tired of seeing turnover. If you have a quality product, right, having turnover within you, people wanting to come and steal your coordinators and take them away from you is a good thing. That's a compliment to you.
Better than not wanting to do it.
Because right now, nobody is coming in to try and steal the people we just got rid of, right?
Right.
And so I have no issue with somebody that's bounced around and has been in multiple places over the last 30 years and multiple stops for 1 year. And come here for 1 year. I don't care. But produce, right? Produce.
Let's get it going.
And let's get back to an entertaining brand of football. So that's
offensive hire will be big. Offensive hire will be big.
Big, right? And it goes back to what I was saying a while ago. You've got to bring in guys, not, in my opinion, not necessarily based on scheme, right? You can bring in whatever scheme you want. That's the one thing I said last podcast. It's one of the beautiful things about transfer portal is that if you switch coordinators at the end of the year, you get to go out and recruit guys that fit that scheme of that coordinator you hired, as opposed to the coordinator having to come in with this new scheme and has got a roster full of players that may not fit it. And I think that's why you're seeing some of the slow play on the transfer portal side and that sort of thing is we're going to go hard after kids that fit the scheme of the coordinator that we hire, as opposed to just going out and getting whoever. And I think you're going to see, with the defensive line coach, what's his name, that we just hired?
Ryan Osborne,
right?
Yeah.
Did you see he was the defensive coordinator or coach at Charlotte, right? Mm-hmm. And you saw who from Charlotte went in the transfer portal? Jadeveon Clowney's.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Little brother or little cousin.
Yeah,
right?
Nice.
Who was a 4-star recruit out of high school. Nice. So you don't think that there's some play there and hiring? You don't think there's some play? It's like when we hired what was the basketball player Cunningham?
Kay Cunningham. Yeah, we hired his brother Cannon.
Yeah, we hired his brother. Why did we hire his brother? You know what I mean?
And then he wasn't here the year after.
Yeah, there's no secret there, and there's no problem with that. I mean, that's using,
zero. That goes back to what you were talking about a minute ago.
Yeah, that's using it smart. So was Ryan Osborne hired to try and get Jadeveon Clowney's sibling or cousin, whichever one it is, who's now in the transfer portal? Right. Yeah. There's a lot of that goes on, and that's how it has to be used. Right.
It could break a tie, maybe.
You could. Yeah, it could. It could be a deciding factor. Right. And where the deciding factor used to be. How many uniform combinations you got?
Or how many years do we think he'll stay here?
Yeah.
That's no longer the deciding factor. Now the deciding factor is does he have
you know what my bare minimum is how long they stay here? You know what my bare minimum is?
1 year.
1 year.
Yeah. Right.
One. Right.
That's kind of how you have to change. Yeah.
That 1 year of progress may result in 3 more recruits next year.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
That's how you have to adapt to it. Yeah. And that not going out and getting people that you can micromanage, not going out and getting people that's going to be here for long tenured that nobody else wants. That's not a successful process, right?
Absolutely.
And so go out and get the biggest name that you can get that has the biggest accolades or the best resume, and somebody that's going to draw athletes to OSU, something that
will attract 22-year-olds and not 18-year-olds.
I think so. That's what I think. And I said that last podcast. The guys that you use to recruit as a 3-star out of high school, you don't have to change your recruiting philosophy, right? You just have to go get those guys. That same kid now has a year or two experience that's in the transfer portal. We'll get him, right? And the guys that you recruited.
That guy, though, being a couple years older, might want to play for a more mature coach, though.
Correct.
One that has NFL experience.
Correct.
Which is why the pivot to more NFL type, more experience is a wise one to make.
So let me put it this way, okay? Coach Sanders, I refuse to call him prime. Right? I ain't playing that game. That's what's wrong with college football right now is prime, not Coach Sanders.
Yeah,
prime, right? Yeah. Coach Sanders is doing a heck of a job. But who is Coach Sanders going to appeal to more? An 18-year-old high school student or a 22-year-old that's married and got a kid?
Who's the question? I don't know the answer to that, honestly.
I would say an 18-year-old kid.
Yeah,
right?
that's where I was going to go.
Yeah, I would say that a more mature athlete, not that Coach Sanders can't do wonders with.
But he's hired NFL assistants. That's why the older guys are going.
Right. Warren
he was
Sapp
smart to do that. Yeah.
Right. But the environment, and I don't really like the word culture, but the environment and the culture of Colorado football is not suited for, or is not as near as attractive for a more mature kid, in my opinion.
Right.
A more mature kid that may already have started a family that's a junior in college. Right. It's a very attractive place to go when you're coming out of high school and going to experience college for the first time.
Sure, absolutely.
Right. And so that's my thought, is that same kid that you were recruiting Allen, Texas 3 years ago or 2 years ago that you didn't get and is now in the transfer portal, go get him.
Yep, absolutely.
You know what? Go get him. That's the kid you wanted to begin with, and now he's already got 2 years of experience, right? And I think you're seeing that all across college football, whether it's the Reslov kid from BYU or Scatabo from Arizona State or whoever it is, right? Are those guys that weren't highly recruited out of high school and ended up at a lower Division I or a junior college. I mean, the transfer pool is now is a junior college.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
I mean, everybody's a junior college now. Everybody is a 1 or 2 year stop for every athlete until they feel like they can get a better deal somewhere else. Okay. And to me, the recruiting philosophy doesn't have to change. You just have to go to a different place to get it. And you're actually getting a more mature, more experienced person than what you were recruiting 2 years ago.
Yep. Awesome deal, Coach. Hey, man, appreciate you joining. Great show again. Great job, Coach. And go Pokes, right?
Go Pokes.